Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of You Gotta Meet, where today I am so excited about my guest, Charina Amunategui, who is an accomplished finance professional with over 20 years of experience in asset management operations across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Bermuda. Pretty impressive. She's also currently serving as the executive director, okay, she's a big wig, of business execution in fund finance at MUFG Investor Services, which is a subsidiary of Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, which just so happens to be one of the largest banks in the world. So obviously, as you can see, she's a badass. And that's all I'm going to tell you about her because, as you know, here on this show, we are all about finding out who this person really is through a powerful conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, you gotta meet Charina Amunategui. Welcome.
Hi, Stu. How are you? Nice to
I
be here.
This is so fun having you. Just to give a little bit of context to those who are watching or listening to this right now, Sharina and I have this kind of almost peculiar past in the sense that there's a past, but there's no past. Whereas we were in the same world through the city of Toronto, socially, but at the same time, kind of involved in the world of motivation and inspiration. I was putting on shows, and Charina felt that they had a little bit of merit, and so gave me the grace of coming with her friends from time to time. So our worlds crossed, but it wasn't like from there we became close friends, and I got to get to know who the amazing person that she is. And years later in New York City, we reconnected, and we went out for a tea, and we had our own human connection. And so, really and truly, I kind of know Sharina, but today I'm going to really get to know you. So thank you for agreeing to be on the show.
Thank you, Stu. And I do want to say that although we have not had this very strong personal connection, I want to really highlight I'm sure you're aware of the effect your work has on people's lives, but I do want to say that I can literally draw a straight line from your work, from being at the top 10 event in Toronto, to meeting you for the first time, to how I've had many successes over the years in my life.
Wow, you know what? For that reason, you can come on the show anytime you want. Thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you. And, with the work that I do, sometimes you never know if people are listening or paying attention. So it's always heartwarming to know that. So I appreciate that. Okay, so as anyone who is joining for the very first time, if you've never seen or heard You Gotta Meet, the thing that I love about this show is that I just pepper my guests with completely random questions from a list of 50 questions. And so we jump around all over the place, but the key is to ask somebody questions that people would not normally ask a stranger or a colleague or a client, and to show you that these are not conversations that people shy away from, but rather we should be embracing. And so with that in mind, we're not going to waste any time. We are going to jump right into it. And so one of the random creative questions I want to ask you straight away, Charina, is when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Stu, from day one, I've always wanted to be in finance. I've always wanted to be a banker.
From day one?
From day one. My mom worked at a bank when I was little, and she would
Okay.
take me to the bank with her, and I would see her and her friends having a great time working together in a corporate environment. And when I got to university, I went to the University of Waterloo in Canada. I used to study in the library wearing my suit because I thought I'm dressing for my future.
Oh my
So
God, you're so cute. You did that. You know what? When I used to work at in a cafeteria at a hospital, I wanted so badly to feel like I was a business person that I would go into the cafeteria and I'd eat my lunch and I would pretend to be reading the stocks in the newspaper. I'm so embarrassed to even say that. I've never told anybody that. So you really wanted to, so you dressed the part, and so now was it a case where as a little girl, did you like just seeing the organization of the bank, or were you already turned on by the financial structure of these big conglomerates? What was it that turned you on? What did you like about it?
I liked the fashion. I liked the suits. I liked the high heels. And I thought, I think I'd look good with being in that job.
No
I think I
kidding.
do well. I like the idea of a hierarchical structure where you have to
Hmm.
climb the ladder, you have to work hard, prove yourself, and be
Hmm.
promoted based on merit. Um, and I just wanted to I visualize myself flying to conferences, to meetings, dressed up in my suit, doing deals, meeting with clients.
Okay.
It was really the power of visualization. Like, I visualized all these things, and I'm very surprised to say that they've come true.
That's amazing. I love that. I mean, we all believe in, I shouldn't say we all, but we should believe in the importance of the laws of attraction. And if you kind of like see it and believe it, you can actually create it. Now, let me challenge you on something here, because when I see you as an outsider, I kind of see you as, and I say this with a caveat, I don't really know the show well, but I see you as like a Sex and the City woman. You know, those like 4 or 5 gals that are like, Sarah Jessica Parker, and like uber fashionable, lots of friends, going out to bars and having cocktails, like on the scene. That's the way I see you as this New York person. Do you ever find that there's like, does it surprise you almost as it like you're in this kind of conservative, let's say traditionally conservative type of job, and at the same time your personality reflects that other side of you? Does that seem? Have you ever thought about that? Because it just seems like almost like they collide for me.
Um, I am a pretty serious person. I would say I love Sex and the City. I watch it, and I wish I could live that life, but I'm very, very strict and disciplined with my lifestyle in terms of working out, going to the gym on a daily basis. So I do find that my persona, I do carry it into all areas of my life. I love the fashion, but I do have a friend who has to help me dress because I'm not that fashion forward, but I try to do my best. And I love the like nightlife in New York City for sure.
Right on, right on. So then, when you started transitioning into this kind of higher level banking role, did you find yourself, like you say, feeling surprised at all? Or was it more of a, no, I knew from day one that I was going to be doing this?
I knew from day one that that's what I wanted to do, but I still surprised myself to see, wow, this is what I dreamt of, and it's happening.
Right.
And as it's happening, I do feel that moment of imposter syndrome. Like, oh, I dreamt it. My dad told me dreaming was free, so dream big. Why not? But as I see things really happen, I remember a moment when I flew to Brazil on my own to meet with clients. For months prior to that, I learned how to speak Brazilian Portuguese because I wanted to prepare for these meetings. And I'm sitting in a bulletproof car because we had to be picked up in such a vehicle. And I'm out to meet CFOs of large asset management firms. And I thought, is this really happening?
Yes.
And, I just had to sit down and think, okay, I made this happen. This is something I dreamt of, and now it's real.
It's funny. I still think that to this day, I have been on stages, as you know, doing corporate speaking at major events for probably 20 years now. And even to this day, I will get off stage and I'll shake hands and I say goodbye. And then I get into the taxi or I jump on the plane. And I look out the window. I think, I still can't believe, even after doing it for 20 years, that people still say, hey, we want you to be the person who gets up on stage and everyone's going to pay attention to you for an hour. So I think that anyone who's watching or listening, the first thing I would even just say to them as you hear this is to remember that I don't think imposter syndrome ever really goes away. I think that it's easy to think that once you hit a certain level of success, then it will go away. But all of that ends up happening is that once you get to a certain level of success, there's just the next level of success where you feel like an imposter. And so, yeah, even though you've driven in the bulletproof car in Brazil, the next time it'll be with like the president of some country, and like then now you feel the imposter because of that, right? So it just never goes away. So now when you think about your childhood, though, how does your getting to where you are today compare in contrast maybe to the type of childhood that you had? Was your childhood easy? Was it difficult? What did you have to go through as a kid? And tell us where you're from, where you grew up, and everything.
Yeah, I was born in the Philippines. I grew up there, and I have 4 siblings. When I was 14, my parents told us, guess what? We are moving to Canada.
Wow.
I was in shock.
So what was one of your first thoughts when you heard that? Were you excited or nervous?
I was extremely nervous, extremely sad, upset. I did not know any other way of life aside from spending time with my friends. I was 14 years old. I was just entering my teen years.
Wow.
And, first thing on my mind was, okay, how do I make this stop? How do I stop this from happening? Because I was so terrified.
Right.
And we got to Canada. It was the summer. So we had a few months to climatize, but nothing really prepares you for a Canadian Toronto winter.
No, even it shocks Canadians, like let alone people from the Philippines.
Yes. And the language, of course, although we learned English in the Philippines, we did not really speak in full sentences.
Right.
And the way schooling was, kids were particularly mean at that age. So
Yeah.
it was definitely a tough transition. We also suffered from financial difficulties. My parents, who were professionals in the Philippines, my dad an engineer, my mom in a bank, because of the economic difficulties when we arrived in Canada in the early 90s, they took on jobs working in a warehouse.
Right. Yeah.
Working hard labor. So it was a very difficult time.
The classic Canadian immigrant story, right? Which is, one of the reasons why we have so much to owe to the immigrants that came to any country from that perspective. So, backtrack though for the first 14 years of your life. What was that like? Because a lot of people haven't traveled to the Philippines or Southeast Asia in close by. What was it? What did it look like? What was the everyday for you?
So a typical home is an intergenerational home. So we live with my grandparents and my aunt and uncle and cousins. So it was a very fun and lively home where we had our cousins there. I had my siblings, and we went to it's very typical for the families to send their kids to private schools in the Philippines, to be able to access good education. So it was a completely different way of life, absolutely. And
Yeah.
Vacations were spent just out into the beach towns.
Right.
Wouldn't fly anywhere for vacations or anything like that. And it was
Okay.
very strict. The neighborhood that we lived in was very, very dangerous. So we were not allowed to leave the house ever.
Wow.
Unguarded, unchaperoned, that was not possible. So when I see on television, I see kids playing with their neighbors, that was an experience we never had as children, because we were not allowed to leave the house except to go to school, because it was
Wow.
far too dangerous to step outside.
And so let's put that into perspective. Stepping outside, what are we talking about? Like, what is outside?
Um, there was like people shooting or stabbing each other, and robberies, and
Wow.
that kind of
Oh
it was
my.
very crowded, financially challenged neighborhood. It still
Right.
is to this day. So security was very, very important to be able to protect ourselves. So sometimes if we heard anything loud noises outside, we would just make sure to close the windows, close the doors, and just
Wow.
make sure we did not witness a crime.
So you've seen your fair share of poverty, I would imagine, growing up, and a lot of people haven't. If they haven't seen it, they can't even imagine being able to understand how some people live. Have you gone back into some of these neighborhoods now as somebody who's more established and professional? And if so, what was that like?
I went back last November to visit my grandmother, who's now 95.
Oh my God.
And the neighborhood has changed a little bit, but not dramatically.
Okay.
There's still very many people without homes, without access to clean water, electricity, no access to education.
Right.
So it's very hard to see and witness. I thought perhaps it's a memory as a child, and perhaps it wasn't quite as accurate as I remember, but to see it as an adult is exactly how I remembered it. It was sad.
Yeah, I had this interesting moment where I was back in Ukraine. Now, my partner came to Canada when she was 10, and at that time it was USSR. And so we had been just kind of scooting through, I guess it was Lviv, Ukraine, which now is Ukraine. It was no longer part of the USSR. And we were just heading over to some other area, some other country. I can't remember what it was, but we said, oh, we should quickly pop in to see where you grew up. And so we asked the taxi driver to go to the old neighborhood, and we got out of the taxi and we went up to her building, and she immediately broke down sobbing. And she said, for her, she said, what was interesting is that growing up in such a poor environment, parents do such a fantastic job of shielding us from many of the difficulties that they are going through. And for her, she felt like she was living in this dream world every single day. And then immediately when she saw the building and she saw the neighborhood and she saw how dilapidated things were, she realized that she had really been in a completely different world than the one she thought she was, and it just hit her so emotionally. And I can only imagine that for you, even yourself, as you walk the streets of New York City, where people have access to everything, do you ever find yourself kind of sometimes frustrated with people not maybe realizing just how good they have it after seeing what you've seen throughout your life?
Absolutely. I think sometimes when I think about how people view education, how important it is to be able to expand your knowledge, to be able to have options for yourself. Sometimes I hear people really not valuing it as I think they should. We cannot help the social class we are born to, but the only way we can move from one to another is through education. So that does worry me a bit when people don't see the value in education.
100%. I can only imagine, though, having come from where you've come from and getting to where you are today, that naturally you do, and you were referencing it earlier on about the imposter syndrome. And there must have been times when you must have doubted your own abilities. Who am I to be here and in this place, and now New York City and even Canada, as you said? What has that been like for you to, or have you ever doubted yourself? And if so, what did that look like and how'd you overcome it?
So typically, I go to a lot, being in finance, I go to a lot of meetings, and I believe that there's this mistaken idea of this, that the loudest person in the room is the smartest person in the room.
Right.
It's really unfortunate that this is an idea we've picked up, and people feel this pressure to behave a certain way, to be respected, to be regarded well in the industry. And when I see that, it really saddens me, because I do not buy into that. Like, I believe in integrity and being myself. And I do have those moments where I think, well, should I act that way? Should I interrupt people? Should I talk over people? Should I behave like a buffoon in front of the whole room and monopolize the whole room? Is that what's going to make me successful? But then I do pause and I realize, I think to myself that what's more important to me is that to stay who I am, to my values, and be respectful of people. Because I think people may not remember what you say, but they will remember how you make them feel. So in those moments of imposter syndrome, that's what I think of is integrity.
Integrity. Yeah. And I can only imagine too that you must see yourself as somebody who is like, listen, you want the results? I'll show you results. I'm not going to be the person who screams in the room, but I'll get you the results.
Absolutely. I think I manage a lot of different stakeholders, people who have different goals and sometimes competing goals. And I try to get to know people one by one and really understand where they're coming from instead of going hard on people and raising your tone. I think you may get away with it the first time, but the second time, people are not going to want to help you. And
Right.
I think I believe in that power of investing in people and in that currency of just having really good, strong relationships.
Mm-hmm. And is that something you've heard over the years from maybe your own mentors or people who you've reported to? Is that what they like about you or admire about you that you bring to the table?
I think so. I think I've done really well. I've been with my current firm total of almost, this is my 18th year. I've had
Wow.
3 or 4 major job role switches in that time. And each time they've bet on me based on my potential. So for example, when I was living in Toronto, this is about 11 years ago, I was in a fund accounting role. And one day during a management meeting, I heard that the head of business development in New York had left. So right after that meeting, as soon as the meeting was finished, I went up to the HR lady and I said, I want that job. I want you to move me to New York, please, as soon
Wow.
as possible. And she said, well, you don't really have the experience to do that. You've
Yeah.
not done that previously. But I think because of the time they've spent with me, they know that I work hard. They know that I have this ability to get along with people, to work collaboratively. They took a chance. A year later, a lot of conversations, a lot of stakeholders voting in their vote of confidence, but it happened. I was transferred here in 2014.
I love it. I love it. I think it's so important just asking for what you want. The cliche thing, as we've all heard, is the worst they can do is say no. And, I find that even with this podcast, it's like we'll put requests out to people that I've met or people I don't know. And most of people say no. And you just get to the point where and I shouldn't say they say no, they just don't respond, which is even like sometimes kind of heart wrenching on some level because it's like having to hear the word no can be painful, but to be completely ignored is just like a level of almost disrespect. And you just have to roll with it and you just have to be okay with it and to not let it be something that stops you from continuously asking for whatever else it is that you want from life. And so good for you for asking. Now, so you talked there about you've had a number of different roles within your organization and also like different roles just in life in the sense you're living here and you're living there. And so these are pivots that we've all gone through in life. When you think back to your life, what is one of the biggest pivots that you've ever taken? And, what happened and what did you learn from it?
I would say one of the major pivots when we met last year for tea, I had mentioned I had just recently graduated with my executive MBA from Yale University.
Right. Yeah. Big
That
deal.
thank you. That was a major, major pivot for me.
Hmm.
I did my undergraduate studies at University of Waterloo in Canada. That's about 20 years ago. And I always had this regret that I was not really the best student. I was not 100 focused on my studies. I was in such a hurry to grow up. I
Right.
wanted to do what I had to do in school, get a job and go out in the workforce. And for many, many years, I felt a lot of regret about that. And I started to doubt my abilities that, oh, maybe I didn't do well because I wasn't academically strong and I didn't work hard enough. So I decided to challenge that self-limiting belief. In 2021, I went to apply to business school. I only applied to Yale because that's where I wanted to go. And I got accepted. Each day was really a grind of comparing myself today versus who I was yesterday, and just making sure that I was just doing something better, doing something different every day to challenge that really deep inner belief that I wasn't good.
Right. Okay. So you had like a bit of an imposter syndrome there as well, thinking did you say like, am I catching on this that you didn't feel like maybe you were good enough to be able to go to Yale? Is that a thing?
I felt that I wasn't sure if I was made for the academic challenge. I was working full time in my career. I had a brand new role and then going to school every other weekend for 2 years. It was the executive program. It was a full-time workload. In those 2 years, I completed about 40 courses, and not having had a good academic history in the past, I thought, well, what's to say how well I will perform? But I really worked hard and I surprised myself. I was a great student and I loved it. And now many of my professors invite me back to be a teaching assistant for them.
Oh my God, that must be such a trip, right? I mean, because you never really saw yourself as much of a nerd. You didn't see yourself as the total brainiac. You knew you could prove yourself in corporate arenas, and you've shown yourself that. But it's almost like, it's almost like saying, well, I'm really great at the piano, but I don't know if I can play the violin. And all of a sudden now you are in this class of, I can only imagine, pretty high octane, pretty successful people. Is that safe to say? I mean, that must have been intimidating.
Very intimidating. There was about 50 in the class. Half of them already had postgraduate degrees.
Jeez.
15 of them were medical doctors.
Oh my gosh.
So
Hi, I'm Dr. So and so. Oh, nice. Okay, I'm Charina.
yes, I'm in finance.
Yeah, that's right. I haven't saved a life recently, but you know what? I'm still going to beat you in this. That is intimidating, right? I sometimes I go to a social event and I meet people who are surgeons and they're whatever multi-billionaire entrepreneurs. I'm like, I should not be in this room. I am the last guy that should be here right now. But of course, we all know it's ridiculous because everyone has their own set of wonderful that they bring to the table. So you graduated from Yale. Did you cry when you graduated?
I think I did. When my
Yeah.
mom, congratulated me,
Oh,
I
wow.
started to cry because I didn't really think it was really happening. It
Oh
was,
my
for
gosh.
my mom who sacrificed everything that we had in the Philippines. And this is exactly why she did it. It was for us to access education in North
Oh my.
America. And at the time when I first went for my undergraduate degree, we couldn't afford $1 to send me to school. I had to borrow everything to go do
Right.
my first undergrad. And only now in my 40s, I'm able to then say, okay, let me take away some savings to be able to make this type of investment in myself and go to an Ivy League school.
Oh my. What a turn of events. She must have just been blown away. What did the rest of your family think?
Oh, they all came, my sister, my aunt, my cousins, and I had a big cheering squad during the graduation.
Oh, that's incredible. And your father,
My
tell
father,
me.
unfortunately, he passed away. He's my stepfather. He passed away in 2007.
Okay.
One of the things he asked of me before he passed was to, I had the choice back then in 2006 when I left Bermuda to move to New York or to stay in Toronto.
Hmm.
And so he had asked me, he never asked me for much. And he said, I'd like for you to stay. And he
Oh.
passed 6 months later. And I'm so glad. I would never have traded that 6 months I had got to spend time with him
Mm.
by choosing to live in Toronto. So my New York debut was then postponed until 2014 when I eventually made it here.
And what was it like for you to lose a parent at such, I consider that a young age? How did that change you?
I really miss him so much. He was just a great dad. I think our family ever since has become closer. We've learned to really value each other more, and the time we spend together is really fun because now we've realized like we're not going to have each other forever, and we
Yeah.
better make the most out of it. So this summer, where my mom, my cousins, my sister, and aunt, we're planning another girls' trip to Canadian Rockies to Calgary too.
Oh my, that is so exciting. Um, Now, I know that I'm kind of taking you on a tangent here, but I just have to ask, do you ever have conversations with him, like in your mind or in your dreams or anything like that?
Ah,
Or do you just
yeah.
just say something like, "Hey, look at
I
me"?
think, I think when I was finishing up my Yale degree, I thought, oh my God, like he would be over the moon. He would be
Right.
beyond happy. I wish he was here. I definitely thought that.
Oh wow, he sounds like a cool dude. Well, on my end, I'm a big believer that we all meet again on the other side. So I think there's a pretty joyous reunion coming. And until then, kick some major butt and have as much fun as you can while you're here, right? So what? Tell me, like along this journey now that you've been going down. What would you say is one of the harder lessons that you had to learn, like, or a lesson that you had to just kind of learn the hard way? Because I find that as I go through life, so many times it's like I'm a big believer in this expression: the lesson will be learned when the lesson is learned. And so, for you, what is one lesson that you just had to learn the hard way?
I will tell you, Stu, it's having financial literacy. It's not something taught in school. So,
Right.
sometimes we grow up and depending on our environment, there's this immense pressure to keep up with the Joneses, to overspend, to essentially borrow from our future self.
Yeah.
That's exactly what
Oh
we're doing. We're
wow. What a
not
way.
thinking about how do we pay something off in the future. It's about, oh, let's do this now because it's something I really want to do and make impulsive decisions. And I unfortunately fell into that like most people. I did not have any guidance or did not know much about financial literacy. I made some bad financial mistakes, and I had to correct, and I had to make sacrifice to be able to correct myself. I had to learn and have the humility. So now my four favorite words are I cannot afford it. Before, those four words used to fill me with shame because I thought, well, I can't say that to someone. Oh, I can't afford that vacation. I can't afford that car or that house, because I felt like, oh, are they going to judge me?
Yeah.
What are people going to think? But now I'll happily say, I'm like, no, I cannot afford
Yeah,
that. Like, that's
that's
not in
not
the
in the,
budget.
yeah, I know. Whereas, as you know, living in New York City, that's almost an everyday thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, no, you know what? Or at some point, I'm getting to the point in New York where I'll say, I refuse to pay that amount. I'm sorry, I cannot justify a $27 glass of wine. I don't know wine well enough. It just cannot be that good.
I refuse to pay $10 for eggs.
Right. I know. That's the big one today, isn't it? So your financial literacy, I can only imagine then now that you know it and you have it, and like you said, you had to learn it the hard way. Do you find yourself feeling almost inspired or motivated to want to make sure that other people know this? And if so, like, are you out there trying to get people to know this?
Yes, I do. I sit on the board of Inspiring Girls USA. It's a nonprofit where we do provide role models to young girls um, in middle school and high school. And part of our program is a partnership we have at with BlackRock, where
Okay.
we bring girls over to the BlackRock office to do financial literacy training. We teach them anything from opening a checking account to a credit card to interest to student loans, and just how to budget. We use jelly beans. We do
Right.
a puzzle with jelly beans on how to budget, because money is finite. Resources are limited. How do you then allocate to what's most important?
Why do you think that this is not taught in schools? I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer.
I wish it was. I think there's a lot of things not taught in schools.
Hmm.
I think it's just up to us to really raise awareness for it.
Hmm.
It can be taught in schools, because now we're building partnerships with local schools here in New York City and
Okay.
throughout the country to bring financial literacy to schools. So I think it's something that it can be if
Hmm.
we asked for it.
Yeah, sadly, sometimes it takes the public to educate the government on what is best. And you're right, we can't just sit there and cry our tears that it's not happening. We have to grab the bull by the horns, so to speak, and get it in there. You know, someone asked me recently, what is something that you really want that's important that you teach your children? And the way that the question was posed was beyond like the obvious, like perseverance and to be kind and all kinds of things. I said, okay, well, from that perspective, then I would say one of the most important things I want to teach my children is how to be entrepreneurs. And I said, I don't care if they don't become entrepreneurs and they end up, getting a great job in other arenas. However, I want them to be able to think like an entrepreneur. And so I said, I'll walk down the street with them and I'll see a papered up uh, establishment that's gone out of business. And for the fun of it, I'll say, well, what would you put into this place if you had the choice? And of course, at this age, like my daughter will say something like, I would put a unicorn stuffy store there, which of course is really cute. But I'll then challenge her. I said, well, then do you think that there's a market for that in this neighborhood? And what kinds of people buy those types of things? Well, girls like me. Okay, then do you think what's the population of girls like you in this neighborhood? I don't know. And so you just start get them starting to think that would that business really fly here? And so it's these life skills that I want to be able to teach them. And financial literacy, same thing. I'll be in a store with them. They'll see something silly that is only going to give them a quick endorphin hit. And I'll say, sure, you can absolutely have that. I'm giving you permission to have it. The difference is, though, I'm not going to pay for it. You have to take it out of your piggy bank and you have to pay for it. And it's been so interesting when all of a sudden they see that they're the ones who are going to, I guess, lose out on their financial resources to make this thing a reality, that they stop themselves and say, hold on, maybe I don't want to do this. And you said something that I've never heard before, which I loved, and I'm going to totally steal and start repeating, and that is you're borrowing from your future self. Wow, game changer. Such a smart way of saying it.
Yes, I borrowed immensely from my future self and I suffered. I purchased a home I couldn't afford. I had to sell it at a loss.
Right.
It sucked. Painful.
It sucked. Well, you know what? It's important, I guess, to also be able to have some of those stories too. So, speaking of which, what's one of your favorite stories to share when you think about your own life now? You know, whether it's through the success that you've managed to obtain in business, or whether it's just in your personal life. What's a story that kind of puts a smile on your face when you share it with others?
I try to visit a new place in the world I've not seen before every year.
Wow.
So one of
Okay.
my favorite trips is hiking the Inca Trail in Peru. I wasn't very fit back then, and a normal person would take about, I believe they said, 8 hours a day for about 3 days, except it took me about 12 hours a day for 3.5 days.
Fair.
But it was just this journey. It wasn't
Mm,
about getting to the end. The destination was to see Machu Picchu.
yeah.
But it was such a fun journey to just set a challenge for myself, set a goal, and then literally one foot in front of the other. And I've taken that lesson in life is when times are tough, you just put one foot in front of the other. You just keep moving, keep the energy going, keep moving forward. And you can only pick yourself up because in this Inca Trail, there were no donkeys to bring me up the trail.
Right. Did you
We
feel
had
like at some
guides,
point you weren't
but
going to make it?
oh, if there was an option to turn around, if there was an option to call a helicopter, I would have done it.
Oh, so you probably found yourself thinking, I bit off more than I can chew.
Absolutely. It was it was very uncomfortable. We had to hike, like I said, about 12 hours a day it took me, and then camp. Um, and mind you, we had people like porters carrying our bags. We still had to carry ourselves up the mountain. It was,
Right.
I think, about 15,000 feet above sea level, if I'm not
Oh
mistaken.
my God.
And it was extremely uncomfortable. And ever since then, I've not done a big hike like that. So I told my friends and family, don't let me do that.
I know it's funny. It's like Mother Nature has a way of kicking our ass whenever she wants. And it's funny, like I mean, these kinds of things to know our limitations, but at the same time, to recognize that the parameters of what we think we're capable of are usually so much less than what we're even capable of. My friend Glenn one time said it in a way to me that really stuck with me. He said, the one thing you can guarantee is that most people will see you as a much more awesome version of yourself than you see yourself as. And he says, and you should probably just be that version. And I love that. It always stuck with me. And you know, when you also said this, it made me think about a friend of mine, Catherine, who had she had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and it was this big fundraiser, and it was something she had trained for like months. And even then, she said, when we got close to the summit, and now it's freezing cold, and you're in now the snowy parts, and she said, you've lost so much oxygen, and you are having such a hard time breathing, which you would have gone through. She said it really was just focusing on one thing, and this was what their training had told them: just focus on getting your one foot in front of the next foot, and then the next foot in front of the next foot. And it's on some level, it's a beautiful way of looking at life, especially when you're going through tough times.
Absolutely. I think we all have this need to know how it ends, to know the future. I feel an immense amount of pressure. I put myself through an immense amount of pressure. I have a lot of big dreams. I want to be the CEO of a large financial organization.
Nice.
I'd love to map it out. I'd love to be able to draw a straight line, point one, two, three, follow these steps, but there is no, our careers are nonlinear.
Yeah.
And every day I just try to um, do one small step towards my bigger goals.
Yes, I often tell people when people come up to me and they say, I have these big dreams, things I want to accomplish, but I don't know where to begin. I always say, well, just start anywhere because anywhere is a place and anywhere will lead you everywhere. You just have to get that foot in front of the other foot right now, do that for a little while, and then you get a foot in front of the other foot, do that for a little bit longer. And before you know it, there's that, as they say, serendipitous, magical moment where someone says, hey, Charina, we're going to tap you for this potential CEO role. And it just all magically, well, it feels like it's magical. But there's nothing magical about it. You're the one who pushed yourself to get there. But you don't have to know how you said to get there linearly. It's just just really just continuously waking up and getting one foot in front of the other. Now, so here you are, and you are traveling to these different countries, and you have reached a great level of success. So obviously, there's so much further to go that you want to achieve. But right now, today, how do people misunderstand you? Like, how do they see you in a way that's not necessarily accurate to who you truly are?
So going back to what I said earlier about boardroom etiquette and boardroom behavior, because I choose to listen. I'm a more of a quiet participant in the boardroom where I like to listen to others. I like to listen to their ideas and collaborate. Sometimes I think people misunderstand my silence for weakness
Right.
because that is not the prescribed behavior.
Hmm.
But I really want to stick to my guns, and I want to show an example. And that's also part of why I am on this board role for Inspiring Girls USA, providing role models to young girls, because I want this type of I want young girls to see this behavior as an example, and I want them to mimic that. As
Yeah.
opposed to what we're being taught is that the loudest person in the room is the smartest person in the room. So
Yeah, because I mean, we've talked so much over the years about, over the last, I guess, call it, I don't know, 30, 40 years, women clearly taking on more leadership roles in business, clearly proving that they are just as qualified for these top jobs as a man is. And in the process, though, I like what you're saying, which is it doesn't mean you have to become a man, so to speak, in order to reach those levels of success, but rather to carve your own path. I mean, in fact, I was speaking on a panel years ago, and it was about this topic about women CFOs, and they were talking about very much, showing that we can do what the men do. This was like the kind of the conversation on stage, and I said, I don't want to be necessarily chastised for what I'm about to say. However, I feel like on some level that it shouldn't be your job to prove that you can be just like the men, but rather to carve your own path. And I said, because if you look at a lot of men who have reached high levels of success in business, many of them have done it in very, I would call it, stupid ways. And when I mean like that, but they've done it in ways where they've had ill effects on their health. They've done it in ways where they spent not enough time with their families. They've done it in ways where they drank too much, they smoked too much. They did it in ways where they maybe cheated. And so is that what you want to mimic? Instead, I think it would be better for you to carve a path that we men look at and are inspired by, wanting to be more like you. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with you, Stu. People are still surprised when I tell them that I sleep 8 hours a day, at least.
How dare
People are
you?
like, how dare you? What do you mean you sleep 8 hours a day? I mean, when do you read our emails in the middle of the night, right? Like, why are you working in the middle of the night? And I believe in taking care of myself first and foremost.
Good.
And that is the only way I could be the best I can at all my endeavors, my career, my personal life, to my family. Because if I don't take care of my health, my mental health, physical health, then it all doesn't really mean anything. So I do make it a priority to take care of myself. I go to the gym 5 times a week. First thing in the morning, that's what I do. I do not check emails until I finish working out at the gym.
Smart. You've got your priorities. So you have a set of rules, it sounds, that you live by. What is one rule that comes to mind to you that you feel that you do follow, that you maybe wish more people would?
Oh, Stu, I love this question. I can't wait to answer it. I love rules. It's just like I like to have a handbook of rules. One rule that I absolutely love, and this is how I determine who to trust and whom not to trust, is the grim trigger in game theory.
Oh
And I'll
my.
tell you all about it.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Give it to me.
Two parties, let's say 2 individuals or 2 business partners, walk down the road. They have an agreement. They have an agreement with each other, whether that's business or personal. And for as long as there's been no betrayal in the relationship, you can keep predicting that your next renewal, your annual renewal of your contract will go as planned, because they have not done anything otherwise but to meet their obligation, your contractual obligations. But once one party introduces the idea of betrayal, not meeting expectations, not meeting what was agreed, not doing what they said they would, then at the next juncture, you have to factor that in. You have to factor in that you've now introduced betrayal into the equation. So if you were to forecast their future behavior, then you would have to forecast that, maybe 75% they're going to do what they said they would do. Maybe 25% they won't.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's how I choose who to trust and whom not to trust. I may choose to give somebody a second chance, but for the most part, I think people tell you who they are all the time. You just have to listen.
It's that great expression, show me who a person is in the moment, and I'll show you who that person is all the time. Right? And that's a really great way of approaching not just business, but life as well. What's it called again? What did you say?
It's called the Grim Trigger.
The Grim Trigger. I love learning new things on this show, and I had not heard of that. That's fantastic. So, and I like that you prefaced it by saying, you are open, of course, to second chances, but at the same time, if you're going to get a second chance, you better really show up. You almost have to go double down on how good you did last time, because betrayal is something that if you don't take it seriously, a person will take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of pressure in life to, give people a chance, be nice. It's a nice thing to do. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a game of baseball where you get 3 strikes and you're out, right? Because from the first betrayal that they're capable of it. So
right.
in business, for example, if somebody breaches a contract, well, what's the likelihood they'll do it again? Yeah. Probably very likely.
Right. So yeah, it was that fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And let's face it, I mean, you're not dealing with small amounts of money either, right? So it was, if there was a chance to lose $10 by giving someone a second chance, no big deal. But by giving people second chances, you're in a position where we're talking millions, billions, trillions maybe of dollars. I don't know, but crazy amounts of money.
Absolutely. One of my economics professor had explained to us that the biggest indicator of white collar crime in terms of money managers is that they've had previous violations.
Oh, wow. Is that something? Yeah, I know. I actually, there's a person in my mind right now who I'm thinking about who falls into this category, which is like, I don't know if I would. I love this person, but I don't know. There's certain things you just can't, you just know you should not probably trust them with because of their past record. Well, that's really great. I love that. Now, I'm going to wrap this up soon, but I just have a couple more questions I just want to fire off your way if it's okay. So at this point now, we're talking about all these different things that you have done, but I'm thinking about what you want to do next. And I would imagine you being a human being on planet Earth like the rest of us, you must still have things that you're afraid to do. So if it didn't scare you, is there something that you can think of now that you would say, oh yeah, I would immediately just go and do that? Whether it's in your business life or your personal life?
Mm-hmm. If it didn't scare me, I would take a break, Stu. I would take a sabbatical. I would travel the world. I would be an entrepreneur and just leave it to the wind and just, but I'm terrified. I'm terrified of leaving things to chance, of not having stability because of my childhood, because coming in as a child, immigrating from the Philippines to Canada, there was a lot of instability emotionally, financially, and psychologically. And sometimes I'm still that person mentally where I think, oh, I'm really scared of instability. So, if I could, I would give myself a break and spend some time in Bali or Thailand.
I know. It's funny that you say this because I come from immigrant parents myself. And, the classic story, my parents came to this country with $150 in their pocket and the very first place that they actually lived, and I laugh about it, but they lived in a campground in Waterloo in a tent. And they couldn't afford an apartment, eventually got an apartment, eventually had 3 boys, one was me. And our big thing was stability, stability, stability. And you can completely understand that, and you can relate to this as much as anybody else. And to this day, it doesn't matter how successful I am in business, I will find myself still kind of in that mentality of like, oh, no, no, I can't say no to that contract. I can't say no to that gig because you sometimes fall back into that scarcity mentality. There's not enough of those kinds of things. And yet, when I break through it for moments, I realize a level of freedom and sanity that I have not felt for a long time. And it's, I guess, on some level, it's a surrendering and just trusting that what will be will be. And if you were to go, for example, on that sabbatical, that to trust that when you come back, you'll be in still such great demand as the way you are today. I'm curious, do you think on any level that not only is it your immigrant background that plays a role, but do you feel on any level that being a woman in high level corporate America, is there added pressure on a woman to not take that sabbatical? Because you maybe think about how I know a lot of women feel concerned about going on mat leave, and being forgotten. Is that something that you concern about, the idea of like taking yourself out of the game for that reason too?
Absolutely. Matley was the first thing I thought of as you asked this question. I barely take time off. I mean, even if I was on vacation, I read my emails because there's this immense pressure to stay relevant.
Right.
And I think that I think as a woman in the corporate world, we do have to work harder to prove ourselves. It's very hard to convince someone to take a chance on us, on our potential. Sometimes they look for a perfect list of qualifications. And it's very hard to do that. So if you take some time off, it's almost like and perhaps this is just my perception of it, I'm scared because then that might be an X mark against my name. Like, oh, where'd you go? Why did you take time off? For what? Right? What do you need it for? So,
Yeah, is there something wrong with you? There must. Oh, Charina, I don't know. She actually did something called taking care of herself. How dare she? I mean, I can only imagine though that this is just something that is a sad reality of something that most people can relate to, and that is like, I mean, a good friend of mine who's a CEO of a private equity firm now. He was always a top dog in many Fortune 500 companies, and then had a kid, and just kind of. And there was a merger, and he got packaged out, and so he kind of leveraged it and took a year off, and then thought, oh, I'll just jump back in the game, and he couldn't get a gig, and he was so close, got down to like one and two for some major positions, and then just lost. Like, it just went to the other person each time, and then he started getting panicky. So now, like, he's like a year and a half, then 2 years out of the game, and was convinced, I'm done. That's it. And as you know, obviously take a couple of deep breaths and found himself in a CEO position, and now he's in the board of directors in big companies. And so it does work out, but man, it takes a lot of courage to just surrender, have faith that everything will be okay. And then, if anything, maybe that's the hack, to leverage it and to then say to people a year from now, no, no, I'm so badass that I can take a year off. Right? That's how good. That's how much demand I'm in. That's how confident I am myself. There's the reframe. We'll have to do it that way. Okay. Last question for you before we jump off this podcast today. Charina, what do you now, after all the things we've spoken about during this call today, what do you love about yourself? I know it's a hard question to answer, but what do you love about yourself?
look, I say this without any shame, is that I love myself, and I put myself first, and I put my interests first. I prioritize my needs and my interest. And that's really the best way I could be to my job, to my family, to my friends. I often hear of people saying, oh, I want to serve others. I don't care if I live in a tent, I'll go serve the world. Well, if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, or if there's a roof over your head, I mean, can you practically really serve others?
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, I encourage people to, be upfront and love yourself before others, because it's just like putting the mask on yourself first in an airplane. That's the only way you can be a productive member of society, when you're happy with yourself, and then you have that ability to bring joy to others.
Yeah, yeah. I heard that said differently not too long ago that really stuck with me, and that is on a physiological level, the heart pumps blood to itself before it pumps blood to any other part of the body. And I thought, wow, our central system that keeps us alive says, even I know from millions of years of evolution that if I don't get the blood first, the rest of you are screwed. So, liver, pancreas, kidneys, hold tight. I'm taking care of me first.
Yes.
That's good. That's good. Well, you know what? I got to tell you, I think that after this conversation we've had today, we're going to have a lot more people who love you just that much more. Because what I really love about you is that, and it just comes through so much in this conversation, is that you are so authentic. And I would actually think that it would be easy for people to get that wrong and to misunderstand that about you in the sense that, well, you know what, if you are so high up the food chain in corporate America, well, you can only get there by being inauthentic. You can only get there by being rude and crass and corrupt. And that is not true. I know you know lots of people who have had the same level of success that you have who are really good, high valued people. And that just comes through so clear in the sense that I know you care about the work you do and you care about these young girls that you service. You care about the people who are in your community. You care about your family. You care about your past and you care about the world. And so, for all those reasons and more, I can't tell you how much I appreciate having you on You Gotta Meet. You are someone that more people really do have to meet. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Stu.
This has been a real pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. This has been so much fun. We will make sure that you have access to all of the great things that make Charina who she is in the bio and in the area below all the places that we post this. But stay tuned for more episodes of You Gotta Meet, where we have powerful conversations with individuals that make a huge difference in the world. Until then, we'll see you soon.